Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 1 Episode 4. It's called Parallels and Interiors. And I had to try and keep cool there, as the word parallel is not easy for me to say. I've always struggled, but I got through it. The review is going to be okay, everyone. But yes, episode 4, we had the big cliffhanger last time. They're in Alaska, and this monster who has freeze breath, and as we learned throughout this episode, consumes heat and sucks in fire and other heat sources and whatnot. This episode does an interesting shift where, because the present day part of the story has got the monster action this episode, we take a break from the flashbacks of the 50s and the older Monarch stuff, and we instead get a flashback to a year ago when Kentaro and May first met, and also the night of Kentaro's sort of first art gallery kind of show, which he kind of ditches to hang out with this new stranger, May, for various reasons. One, he's attracted to her, of course, but obviously there's also this idea of him not really wanting to be there, and why is that? Is he ashamed of his work? Obviously it's more tied to his father, and the fact that the father is meant to be going there, and it seems like by the end of the episode that this was his last chance to see his father. He didn't know that this would be the last time he could have seen him before he went missing. So that's kind of the big through line of the episode, as we keep going back to these flashbacks and we see his art. We see Kentaro be sort of tested and pushed. He's convinced that there's a shelter somewhere to go and find that he saw from the plane, and no one else believes him, so he actually splits up and walks off separately. And while he's doing so, he ends up having a bunch of I don't know if I'll call them hallucinations per se. I guess they are. They're definitely film-like hallucinations, where he sees his father walking around. It's like he's back in the art gallery, all that stuff. The idea being that his determination to stick to his guns gets everyone saved, because he gets to an old station, probably an old Monarch station, radios for help, so we get a helicopter that comes in and rescues everyone by the end. Yeah, I like this episode more than last one, I think, because I had just kind of like I was a bit down on the actual journey of the main characters in present day last episode. It felt like it didn't really do that much other than just get them from point A to point B. Here, there's a lot more thrills, of course. There's a lot more of the main characters trying to survive, and not only are they trying to hide from a monster, but they're also in Alaska with no shelter or food or anything like that. They're struggling to survive, which the show still looks very expensive. These Apple shows look absurdly expensive, but this is definitely the one where the fakeness kind of had to show itself a little bit, because fundamentally, when you've got a bunch of actors running around in what's supposed to be Alaska in night, and what's supposed to be freezing conditions with these sort of visuals behind them, and naturally it's a lot of studio stuff. It's a lot of green screen work and things like that, and no matter how good you try, it definitely looked a lot better during the day. And I don't know if it's because during the day they actually shot on location in some places, and then the stuff at night when they're on the rocks and you've got the pretty lights in the night sky and all that, that was all studio stuff that was green screened, so it just inherently looks faker than the day stuff. I don't know what the ratio was there, or if it's just a simple case of it's easier to fake the daytime stuff, so it just looks better. I'm not sure, but regardless, it definitely had a bit more of a sort of fake movie look to it at times. Which is not to say that it looked necessarily bad. The monster itself still looked very good. I especially enjoyed the scene early on where they're hiding in like an ice cave, and the monster's going over the top, and you can kind of see the lights of it. You know, the luminescence of its tendrils coming through the ice, and they're trying to stay quiet. And you've got a whole bit here where May like falls into some icy water and is having to like really bite her tongue to not scream and make a lot of noise, because obviously that's very painful and cold, which leads to one of the big things of the episode, which is that she's, you know, they're trying to keep her warm because she's fighting hypothermia. That just sort of runs throughout the episode, which does lead to some, I think, a decent little character moment for Kate. I think credit where credit's due. I think one of the best things about last episode was that Kate seemed to finally evolve as a character, and I think here as well, it's not much, but it's a simple little thing where she has a choice at one point to burn the documents that her father had at his tent, because they eventually come back round to the tent that her dad was at, which there is a line here from Kurt Russell about how things act a little bit weird around certain Titans, almost implying like they have an effect on the atmosphere and the gravity and whatever, and they've basically came in a circle because of some side effect of the Titan. You know, that's something maybe I'll come into play a bit more later. We definitely see a lot of like pretty lights coming out of the ground at one point, which is also tied to the Titans and whatever this is building up to. But the moment I was getting at is that there's a choice that's very simple to keep the fire burning to help save May's life, but it means burning the documents that her dad was working on that might have some of the answers that she's looking for, and she makes the choice very quickly to just, you know, let them burn, right? Keep the fire going. It's just a little human moment where she's looking out for May. I think it's funny that the flashbacks in this episode are all about how May and Kintaro's relationship started, and I think they're solid enough. They've got some sweet moments. It is going for that kind of, you know, I don't know if I say star-crossed lovers, but the idea that they're just strangers who bump into each other. It starts off with her not liking that she happened to just because he's taking a photograph of the poster for his art show outside the building, and she happens to just walk past him as he's taking the photo, and then asks if he just took her photo. And I guess technically he did, but he's like, well, no, not really. I was taking a photo of the poster, but she just happened to be in frame. And we know that she's paranoid. We know that she is someone who covers her tracks and is running from something, and there's a bit more into that in this episode. But I think it's interesting that we spend these flashbacks with their first encounter, which is kind of romantic, and almost to the point where you think she's probably not going to want to see him again, but then she does. At the end, she gives him her number, and it goes forward. But then the present day stuff, you've got what seems to be a new friendship forming out of May and Kate, where not only does Kate make this decision to keep the fire burning, even at the expense of some family secrets, potentially, by the end of the episode, May tells Kate to ditch her. Eventually, you're going to have to drop me to survive, and if the time comes, drop the old man too. Survive on your own, look out for yourself and no one else. Like, that's kind of the advice she gives her, which tracks with the character that she's had so far. She seems like she is very much a off-grid type of person. She doesn't let people in. She likes to cover her tracks, look out for herself, and seems to have a lot of issues letting people in and trusting other people. So this advice makes some sense, but of course Kate doesn't follow it. Kate helps her till the very end, helps her run away from the monster when it pops back up, gets her to the helicopter, and then ultimately when they're in the helicopter at the end, May reaches out her hand and holds Kate's hand, and it's very much this, she didn't abandon her, and maybe this is the sort of thing that May needed to see from someone to sort of rekindle her faith in humanity, which is kind of interesting because Kintaro's looking over, feeling a little bit left out. That his ex-girlfriend is now bonding with his estranged sister. He's the one that saved them. He was right. He did see a building. He did go up and get them saved. The only reason why they're all alive at the end is because of him. But it's just kind of interesting. It's just a little bit more complex than it was before. And I think that makes the group inherently a little bit more interesting. It's not like rocket science stuff by any means, but I think those little moments were sort of the things I was clinging on to a little bit more, because it felt like, okay, I understand why this character is giving this bad, very cynical, jaded advice about looking out for yourself and no one else. But part of the story is that Kate is going to sort of ignore that and kind of prove to her that no, people will stick out for you, people will be there for you, kind of thing. And it feels like Shaw had a good relationship with the other characters in the past, and this is now something that these younger characters have to deal with. So as far as Kintaro and Kate's dad goes, he still thinks he's alive because there was more pencil shavings at the little base where the radio and stuff was. So he thinks that his dad got out alive somewhere, and so that chase continues. The end of the episode, of course, is where we kind of intersect with Monarch, Tim, and Duval, the hench lady, if we want to call her that. Are there to greet him at the end, and this kind of makes sense. Like, I feel like now that we're building up something big happening as the season is going on, that's kind of what the subplot with Monarch is. We see this researcher in Utah get some weird readings from Alaska, and they talk about how this is similar to the readings they got in San Francisco before G-Day. So we see Monarch, Mission Control all kind of talking it over and things. It feels like as the season progresses here, I expect our main group to be more working with Monarch, if not directly for them, then kind of going to a similar goal or whatever. I mean, I don't know what sort of deal they're going to offer them next episode or whatever. It might not just immediately go to that, but it kind of feels like there's a big disaster coming, and we're probably going to be building up to either averting it or trying to do damage control with it or whatever it is. I am curious to see what it's building to in that sense, beyond just there's going to be a big monster. It is also worth mentioning the laptop with all the research and stuff they got from Kintaro's dad's files gets frozen by the monster. I suspect May'll try and recover the data from the drives. Like, even if the laptop's busted, the SSD or whatever might still be readable. Maybe. I mean, maybe not. Probably not. But it would make sense for them to try at least, or at least mention that the data's like done. Like, it can be recovered if that's the case. That would make some sense to me. So, yeah, there was some interesting tone moments in this, I think, particularly the Kintaro stuff where he's seeing his dad when he kind of wakes up in the snow and he's a little delirious and he's having these kind of flashbacks where he's seeing his dad and he's feeling bad that he didn't go to see him that night, and that's why he felt like his dad would be. He didn't want his dad to see him be a failure because he didn't think that he was going to sell any art. And by the sounds of it, he sold some, but his agent still dropped him. But I thought the filming style and the mood of this stuff was definitely very different for this entire. If I'm looking at this as the whole MonsterVerse, if I'm looking at this as Godzilla, Kong, all the movies that have came before this, and in this show, I don't recall anything in those movies, and it's been a while since I've seen some of them, admittedly, so maybe I'm forgetting, but I don't remember anything that went into kind of like dreamlike territory where, to the point where, because this came right after Kurt Russell saying, oh, sometimes the Titans have strange effects on the areas around them, I legitimately was starting to question if this was just in his head or if this was actually some kind of, like, he's literally seeing that the past, where his father walks past towards the building, because some of it's flashback stuff where he sees him in the art gallery and whatnot, and that's not even something that necessarily happened, but it's what he is like sort of imagining, or he's imagining getting some kind of closure with his dad. But the first time he sees him, he's just walking through the snow and he walks past them like he's a ghost almost. And I was thinking, and I still think this is possible, that this is something to do with the Titans' effect on the area, and that it's maybe just echoing, I don't know, like things that have happened already or sort of replaying. Maybe if you've been breathing in the Titan atmosphere long enough or something. I don't know. But it felt like because it came right after Kurt Russell said that stuff, or close to it anyway, that was where my mind immediately kind of started to go. And I thought, oh, this is weird and different. I'm not against it. I'm not against some of the Titans having some weird, almost Lovecraftian, I guess, effects on people. Like, that's kind of interesting. And it would definitely separate this show from the movies if they go down a path like that, where they're looking at monsters that have more psychological effects on the people as well as the actual raw destruction. Well, that's kind of interesting. I could be down for that. I will say I appreciate that this show, like, we had a full episode here where we're in the wilderness, we're in the snow, and we're hiding from a monster. It felt like a kind of an adventure-y episode. Could we have had maybe another monster attack in the middle to kind of make them feel more evenly spaced out? Yeah, I think that would be a fair critique. But I do appreciate that it doesn't feel like we're just staying still. It feels like the show has already evolved quite a lot from what the first 2 episodes were. You know, all that stuff when we were in Japan and we were getting to know the characters. Like, I was enjoying all that stuff, but I appreciate that we've moved into literally other places, but just in general, different like status quos, different environments. We're doing different things as we go through the show. The plot's progressing at a reasonable pace, where I think a lot of TV shows would have had the characters running away from Tim and Monarch in Japan for like almost a full season, probably, and I can appreciate that. So that's good stuff. Not that I'm saying this is necessarily the best episode, because I have been enjoying the Monarch flashbacks quite a bit. So, but I think this was, like I said at the start, this was the wise episode to not have those, because the present day stuff has got the monster action, so we're not going to miss those flashbacks quite as much as if this was like a regular episode that we've had before, so there'll just be no monster stuff through any of it. I still kind of miss them, because I really like the vibe of the flashbacks. I like the mythology building of all the Monarch stuff, and them seeing Godzilla and all that. All that stuff is great. So I did miss it a little bit just because I like it, but I didn't miss it in the sense that I was like, oh, because we don't have that, we don't have any monster stuff. No, we did have monster stuff. Arguably, we maybe had slightly more in this episode than we've had before. It feels like there's a very specific quota of monsters per episode so far. I suspect it will go up for 1 or 2 of the episodes towards the end of the season. I feel like we're going to have a bit more in the finale, at least I would expect, but it does feel like there's a very specific, okay, you get 2 scenes of monsters, and in the first few episodes they were relatively quick. I think the scenes here were a bit longer with the monsters, so, you know, I hate talking about it like that, because I don't want it to sound like a monster movie can only be judged in the amount of seconds of screen time that the monsters have, because that's bullshit. That's not true at all. The build up to the monster is just as important, if not more important. But I think, you know, there's a certain level of monster action you expect from a kaiju movie, and I think the TV show, there's a natural kind of like apprehension that they're going to be able to pull that off consistently on a TV show. So it's something that I think is just on the brain a little bit when you're watching it, to see how much they can actually pull off doing this in a weekly format on the level of a major blockbuster. And you know, the cost per episode, I don't even want to think about it. So, but we'll see where it goes. But it does feel like the plot is. It almost feels like this ended the first act of the season, which makes sense because this is episode 4 of 10. And now that they're with Monarch, I mean, maybe they'll do like a whole thing where they'll be just being questioned for an episode. That's possible. But it feels like we can get to a point now where maybe they're going to end up being helpful to Monarch, because they're going to, I don't know. I mean, how the young characters are going to be super helpful yet is unsure. I mean, May'll probably hack some shit because that's what she does. Shaw obviously has a lot of experience, but the siblings, I don't know what they offer to Monarch just yet, other than just, oh, we want to do this to help find her dad, so we've got motivation. So we'll see. But there's my scattered thoughts on episode 4 of Legacy of Monsters, and we'll see what episode 5 brings next week. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I always appreciate any help, any support, and that includes hitting the like button. Helps out a bunch if you do that. But that's me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?